My name is Amelia, and at 32 years old, I never thought the word home could be ripped away from me in the space of a single dinner. It was supposed to be just another Sunday. The kind where the roast filled the house with warmth, the silverware clinked against plates, and we all went through the motions of being a family. But when my mother stood, eyes burning like a wildfire, and screamed, "Get out and never come back," something inside me shifted forever. I had heard those words before. Threats tossed around like weapons in my childhood, sharp enough to leave scars even when they missed their mark. But this time, I listened. I picked up my bag. I walked out. What no one knew, not my mother with her icy glare, not even my silent father staring into his glass of wine, was that for 3 years I had been quietly paying their mortgage, $2,200 every month, $79,200 in total. Money that could have built my own future, gone to my own home, maybe even given me the freedom I craved. Instead, it had vanished into a house where I had never truly been welcome. The irony was suffocating. The very roof my mother had ordered me to leave was the one I had secretly kept standing above her head. That night, as I drove back to my apartment with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, I did not cry. I did not scream. My body felt hollow, almost mechanical, like I had become someone else just to survive the moment. But deep inside, a question burned hotter than any anger she had thrown at me. Why am I the one holding this family together when they have only ever torn me down? I replayed the years in my mind. The slammed doors, the constant comparisons to my brother and sister, the nights spent studying until dawn only to hear, "Why not an A+?" The jobs I fought for, the career I built, only to have it dismissed as, "She works with money," like it was a silly hobby. Every wound suddenly felt fresh again, opened all at once by that single command, "Get out." And yet, behind the humiliation, there was a flicker of something else. Something I had never let myself feel before. Freedom. Because if I could walk away once, I could walk away again. I could keep walking until their voices no longer echoed in my head. For the first time in my life, I felt the faint outline of a boundary forming not out of anger, but out of necessity. Still, boundaries are terrifying when you were raised to believe they are betrayal. I had always been told that family was forever, that loyalty meant obedience, that sacrifice was love. But sacrifice without recognition, without gratitude, without even the smallest kindness, is not love at all. It is erasure. That realization sat heavy in the passenger seat beside me as I pulled into my driveway. I could almost hear it whispering, "You do not have to keep burning yourself to keep them warm." And maybe, just maybe, that whisper was the beginning of a new story. A story where I stopped being the scapegoat and started being the author of my own life. The road ahead would not be easy. I still had to face the truth about my parents' collapsing finances. I still had to admit to them that I was the one who had kept their house afloat. And I still had to decide whether love could survive once the illusions were gone. But one thing was certain. My mother's words, meant to exile me, had instead unlocked a door I never knew I could walk through. This was not the end of my story. It was the beginning. The silence after my mother's command still echoed in my chest when I sat alone in my apartment. It was strange how quiet the world felt without her voice criticizing me. Yet, the absence did not bring peace. It brought confusion, guilt, and the unbearable weight of wondering what my father must have thought in that moment. He had not spoken. He had not stopped her. He had just looked down into his coffee like the words belonged to someone else's life, not ours. From the outside, the Hamilton family seemed ordinary. A polished colonial house, a father who worked for a pharmaceutical company, a mother who hosted neighborhood dinners, children who went to good schools. But inside those walls, my life had been a minefield. I had learned to measure every step, every word, every smile, because one wrong move could ignite another storm. My earliest memory of my mother was not a lullaby or a bedtime story. It was the sound of her sharp voice telling me I was not enough. If I came home with straight A's, she would ask why they were not A+. If I wore jeans, she would comment that they made me look heavier. If I made a friend, She would dissect that friend's flaws until I doubted my own judgment. She did not correct me out of love. She corrected me out of control. My father played the role of peacemaker. He would slip into my room after one of her tirades, sitting on the edge of my bed with his tie still around his neck, whispering, "It's okay, Amelia." She didn't mean it, but she always meant it. And his words, meant to comfort, became a permission slip for her cruelty. He never defended me. He only patched the wounds long enough for me to face the next blow. I was the youngest of three. My brother Justin left for college at 18 and rarely came back. My sister, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later. That left me alone with them. Alone to bear the full force of my mother's expectations, her disappointment, her bitterness. When she looked at me, I was not a daughter. I was a mirror she despised. Even my career, the one thing I thought I had built with pride, was never enough. I had graduated with honors from Cornell University in finance. I became a senior financial advisor at a respected firm by 28. My clients valued me. My managers trusted me. But to my mother, I was still the one who works with money, as if it were a silly pastime instead of the career I had fought for. You might wonder why I kept trying, why I still showed up for dinners, why I continued to hope for approval that never came. The answer is complicated. Because children, even grown ones, crave their parents' love like oxygen. We hope that one day the storm will quiet, that one day they will see us and say, "You are enough." But the truth is, sometimes storms never stop. And if you stay too long, you drown. That night, after leaving their house for what I thought was the last time, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What would my life look like without them? The thought was terrifying. But it was also the first thought that felt like freedom. And before I continue, let me pause here. If you've ever grown up in a family where love felt conditional, where approval was always just out of reach, you know the weight I'm describing. If you are listening now, and you recognize pieces of your own story in mine, tell me where you are watching from. Share it below, because stories like ours should never stay silent. And if this journey speaks to you, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what comes next. Sometimes the smallest act of sharing can become the first step in setting boundaries. As I sat in that quiet apartment, I realized I had a choice. I could keep playing the role my family had written for me, the scapegoat, the fixer, the silent daughter who carried burdens that were never hers. Or I could rewrite the script. My mother had thrown me out, but in doing so, she had given me something she never intended. She had given me permission to choose myself. That thought settled into me like an ember, glowing softly, waiting to catch fire. I sometimes wonder if I was born wearing a target. From the moment I was old enough to walk, it seemed like I could never get anything right in my mother's eyes. My brother Justin was the golden child who escaped at 18 with scholarships and promise. My sister Elizabeth followed, just as brilliant, just as eager to leave. And then there was me, Amelia, the one left behind, the one who absorbed the full blast of my mother's disappointment. When I was 12, I brought home a report card with 5 A's and 1 B. I can still see the way my mother's lips tightened as she held the paper like it was contaminated. "What happened here?" she demanded, her fingers stabbing the page. Elizabeth never got less than an A-. I remember standing there, cheeks burning, feeling like that 1 B defined me more than the 5 A's ever could. It wasn't just grades. Every part of me became an open field for criticism. My clothes were wrong. My friends were shallow. My voice was too loud. My laugh was too much. She could spot a flaw in a moment of joy and turn it into shame. I grew up believing that love was measured by performance, that approval was conditional, that I was always one mistake away from being discarded. My father tried to soften the blows. After each storm, he would slide into my room with a weary smile. "Your mom only wants what's best for you," he would whisper. But even as a child, I knew that wasn't true. Wanting the best doesn't sound like knives. It doesn't feel like walking into a battlefield every time you enter your own kitchen. As I got older, the battlefield changed but never disappeared. When I told her I wanted to study finance, she laughed outright. "Women don't get taken seriously in that field," she scoffed. Pick something practical. Nursing, maybe teaching. People respect that. But numbers lit up my brain. Equations told stories to me. Patterns whispered truths about the future. I applied to business programs in secret, and when the acceptance letter from Cornell arrived, I felt a fire in my chest. I had done it. Yet even then, victory was stolen. Cornell is fine, I guess, my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment. But it's not Harvard. Elizabeth would have pushed harder. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't hug me. She just moved the bar higher, always higher, until I could barely see it anymore. I graduated with honors. I landed a job at a prestigious financial firm, one of the youngest on my team. By 28, I was a senior advisor. Clients trusted me with their fortunes. My bosses gave me their respect. I built a life of independence and competence. But at family gatherings, when introductions were made, my mother would wave a dismissive hand. "This is Amelia," she would say lightly. "She works with money." As if my entire career was a hobby she allowed me to play at. Those words cut deeper than she knew. To build something so carefully, only to have it dismissed in a breath it wore me down. And yet, some stubborn part of me kept hoping. Hoping that one day she would look at me and say, "I'm proud of you." But that day never came. Instead, each achievement was met with silence, or worse, with comparison. Justin's promotions mattered more. Elizabeth's marriage was more important. I was always in third place in a race I hadn't chosen to run. This constant minimization shaped me. It made me resilient, yes, but it also made me doubt my own worth. I would lie awake at night asking myself, if my own mother doesn't believe I'm enough, then whoever will. And yet, somewhere inside, I began to carve out a quiet defiance. Maybe I couldn't control her words. Maybe I couldn't change her expectations, but I could build a life outside of her gaze. I could create something she couldn't take away with a sentence. That was the seed of independence that later drove me to act when my parents' world collapsed. That hidden fire, born of years of dismissal, would one day push me to step into a role I never imagined, savior of the very house I had never been welcomed in. Because sometimes, the sharpest rejection plants the deepest roots of determination. And though I didn't know it yet, the same mother who had tried to break me would soon discover that her discarded daughter was the only reason her perfect home still stood. I remember the night I found out the truth. It was late, long after the lamps in the neighborhood had gone dark. I had come by to drop off some groceries, thinking it would ease the tension of yet another weekend dinner. The house was silent, except for a faint scratching sound coming from the kitchen. When I stepped inside, I saw my father sitting at the table, shoulders hunched, head buried in his hands. Bills were scattered in front of him like confetti at a funeral. Envelopes stamped with red letters, "Past, due," lay unopened beside a calculator that had given up the fight. His tie was loose, his face gray. He looked like a man who had lost more than just a job. "Dad?" I whispered, afraid that if I spoke too loudly, the illusion of strength he carried might shatter completely. He looked up, eyes wet, and I saw something I had never seen before: defeat. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage," he said quietly. "They're threatening foreclosure." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. This house, the 5-bedroom colonial with its manicured lawn and gleaming granite counters, had always been my mother's pride. It was her kingdom, her crown jewel. And now it was crumbling, not from the outside, but from the inside out. My father had lost his job months earlier, a casualty of corporate restructuring after 28 years of loyal service. At 59, finding comparable work was almost impossible. The severance was generous but finite. And instead of adjusting, instead of facing reality, my mother insisted on maintaining the image. Designer furniture, dinner parties, a lifestyle they could no longer afford. "What about Mom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "She refuses to even consider working," my father admitted, shame dripping from every word. "She says people would talk, that at her age no one would hire her, that we can't leave this house." I stared at the man who had once coached my soccer team, the man who used to stand tall and unshakable. Now he was small, broken, drowning under the weight of expectations my mother refused to release. That night, I made a decision that would alter everything. Without telling them, I contacted the mortgage company the next morning. I arranged for automatic payments to be withdrawn directly from my account. $2,200 every month. It was a heavy burden. Even with my salary, it cut deep into my budget. Vacations disappeared from my plans. My modest apartment remained modest. My old car stayed parked in the same spot, its dents and scratches untouched. But I could carry it. I thought I had to. Because the idea of my parents losing their home, the home filled with lavender-painted walls, the dent from Justin's baseball in the living room, the window seat where I used to escape into books, was unbearable. No matter how much pain those walls had held, they were still the backdrop of my childhood. I couldn't stand the thought of them being taken away. For 3 years, I kept the secret. My father eventually found part-time work at a hardware store, pretending it was enough. He smiled weakly and told me things were under control. I let him believe it. I let my mother cling to her illusion of perfection. I let them keep their pride, even as it cost me my own financial future. Looking back, I should have recognized the cracks sooner. The new credit cards my mother opened. The vague answers my father gave when I asked about bills. The way he drank more, smiled less, shrank into himself. But I told myself it was temporary, that I was helping them until they got back on their feet. The truth was, I wasn't just paying their mortgage. I was paying for the fantasy my mother refused to let go of. And each month, as the payment left my account, I told myself the same lie. It's worth it. They'll see someday. They'll understand. They'll finally thank me. But deep down, I knew. My mother wasn't the kind of woman who said thank you. She was the kind who believed help was weakness, who turned gifts into weapons, who would never admit the house she guarded so fiercely only stood because of the daughter she had cast aside. Still, I kept paying, because love makes fools of us all. From the outside, you would never have guessed there was trouble inside the Hamilton home. The lawn was trimmed like a golf course. The shutters gleamed white against brick-red walls. A wreath appeared on the door every season, matched perfectly to whatever holiday my mother deemed appropriate. Neighbors would walk by and smile, whispering about how put together we all seemed. To them, my mother's colonial was a portrait of stability. But portraits lie. Step through the front door, and the truth seeped through the cracks. The remodeled kitchen gleamed with granite counters, but the bills stuffed into drawers told another story. The dining room table gleamed with polish, but I remembered the tense meals where silence weighed more than food. Even my old lavender bedroom, frozen in time with trophies and childhood posters, felt more like a museum than a sanctuary. The house was her mask. It allowed her to pretend we were thriving. Every rug perfectly vacuumed, every curtain ironed into stiff perfection. It was her defense against the whispers she feared. What no one knew was that the very house she worshipped was balanced on the edge of collapse. Each time I visited, the illusion grew harder for me to stomach. My father seemed smaller, his shoulders slumping, his eyes dimming. The liquor bottles in the cabinet emptied faster. The flask appeared more often in his pocket. My mother, on the other hand, sharpened. Her criticisms were no longer veiled as concern. They were blunt, cutting. I once brought homemade lasagna, her supposed favorite. She took a bite and frowned. "Did you use low-fat cheese? I can taste it." Not in a good way. The sting of rejection spread across my chest, but I forced a smile. Later, when I washed the dishes, she followed behind me, scrubbing each plate again, sighing loud enough to echo. Her message was clear. You will never be enough for me. I tried to bridge the gap. I bought her gifts, cashmere scarves and her favorite blue rare books, even an expensive spa day for her birthday. Each attempt was met with dismissal. The massage was too hard. The facial irritated my skin. Why are you being so nice all of a sudden? What do you want? Her suspicion was worse than her criticism, because it confirmed what I had always feared. She couldn't believe I loved her without condition. My father withdrew more with each passing month. He used to be the man who cheered at my soccer games, who gave rousing speeches at company dinners. Now he hid in the garage or stared into his glass whenever her voice sharpened. He was still my dad, but he was no longer my protector. He had become her shadow. One night, overwhelmed, I confided in my best friend Sophia over wine. I told her everything, the sharp words, the impossible standards, the secret mortgage payments. She listened, her brow furrowing deeper with each word, before she finally said, "Amelia, this isn't love. This is abuse. You're paying for their comfort while they strip you of your peace. Where are your boundaries?" Boundaries. The word echoed through me like thunder. In my family, boundaries were betrayal. We were taught that loyalty meant obedience, that honoring your parents meant swallowing pain without question. And I had lived that script so long, I didn't know who I was without it. Sophia leaned closer, gripping my hand. "Maybe they need to lose the house. Maybe they need reality, not your rescue. You can't set yourself on fire just to keep them warm." Her words pierced me. For years I had convinced myself that saving them was my duty, that love meant sacrifice. But sitting there with Sophia, I began to wonder if my sacrifices had only fueled the illusion, allowing them to keep drowning while dragging me under too. Before I continue, let me pause here. Have you ever tried to hold together something that was already broken, hoping your love could be the glue? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story might remind someone else they're not alone. Looking back, I realize now that the Hamilton house was more than a home. It was a stage. Every curtain, every polished dish, every bouquet of roses in the foyer, it all existed to convince the world we were fine, but behind that stage, we were fractured. My father numbed himself with silence and alcohol. My mother sharpened her pride into a weapon. And me? I was the invisible scaffolding holding it all together, even as it crushed me. It's a cruel truth. Sometimes the most beautiful houses hide the ugliest pain. I kept telling myself that if I just tried harder, she would finally soften. That maybe I hadn't yet found the right key to unlock her love. So I planned, I gave, I bent myself into shapes that didn't fit, hoping one of them might be the one she recognized as worthy. For her birthday, I booked a spa day, $600 in treatments, a luxury I barely indulged in myself. I imagined her walking out glowing, maybe even smiling. Instead, she sat in the passenger seat on the way home complaining. The massage was too hard. My back will bruise tomorrow. And the facial? It made my rosacea worse. I told her to be gentle, but did she listen? Number. I gripped the steering wheel, swallowing my disappointment like sour medicine. Another time, I surprised her with a first edition of a mystery novel she had mentioned once in passing. I thought she'd light up at the thoughtfulness. Instead, she eyed me suspiciously. "Why are you being so nice all of a sudden? What do you want?" Her words cut deeper than her complaints. She couldn't even imagine my kindness was genuine. To her, love was always transactional. Every effort was twisted into manipulation in her mind. I tried cooking. I tried lunches at expensive restaurants. I even tried silence, just sitting with her, hoping that presence alone might stitch together what words could not. Nothing worked. Every road ended at the same wall, her bitterness, her pride, her refusal to see me as anything but a disappointment. Meanwhile, my father disappeared further into himself. If she criticized my cooking, he vanished to the garage. If she snapped at me, he poured another glass of wine. The man who once taught me to ride a bike, who cheered at my childhood games, had been reduced to a ghost drifting between her moods. I longed for him to step in, to defend me, to say even once, "That's enough, Gloria." But the words never came. His silence told me all I needed to know. I was on my own. The more I tried, the more the weight of hopelessness pressed against my chest. It wasn't just rejection anymore, it was futility. I was pushing against a locked door, and every shove only bruised me more. One evening, I came home from yet another failed visit and collapsed at my kitchen table. My best friend Sophia sat across from me, her glass of wine untouched, because she was too busy watching my tears spill onto the wood. "I don't understand," I choked. "I give everything. I bend, I sacrifice, I even pay their mortgage without them knowing. And still, it's not enough. What else can I do?" Sophia's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. Amelia, you're trying to water concrete. No matter how much love you pour, it will never grow. You have to ask yourself, why do you keep trying to win love that's always withheld? Her words landed heavy, like a stone in my chest. Because she was right. Every gesture, every sacrifice, every attempt to heal, was me chasing something my mother was incapable of giving. And in the process, I was emptying myself, piece by piece. But guilt was a shadow I couldn't shake. In our community, boundaries were betrayal. At church, neighbors whispered about ungrateful children who abandoned their parents. I feared becoming one of those names people whispered. So I kept showing up, kept paying, kept pretending that my efforts might someday be enough. Inside, though, I was unraveling. Nights before family visits, I would lie awake, with my chest tight, panic rising, until I could barely breathe. I told myself it was just nerves. But deep down, I knew it was my body screaming a truth my mind refused to face. I wasn't just failing to heal the relationship, I was sacrificing myself to it. And still, I whispered promises in the dark. Next time will be different. Next time she'll see. Next time maybe. I'll be enough. Before I move on, I want to pause. If you've ever found yourself chasing love that never comes, tell me in the comments, what did you try? What did it cost you? Sharing may help someone else see their own reflection in your words. That night, staring at the ceiling, I realized Sophia was right. You can water concrete forever, but it will never bloom. And maybe the problem wasn't that I hadn't tried hard enough. Maybe the problem was that I shouldn't have been trying at all. My father's 60th birthday should have been a celebration. I had spent months saving for a gift that I knew would light up his tired eyes. A Rolex watch he had once admired in a magazine, saying wistfully, "Maybe when I retire." With his career cut short, I wanted to give him something that said, "You still matter, you are still worth honoring." I arrived that Saturday with an overnight bag, a carefully wrapped blue gift box, and a knot of dread in my stomach. My mother greeted me with a stiff hug and her usual jab. "Oh, you cut your hair again." It was finally getting to a nice length. I swallowed my irritation. Correcting her would only ignite a fight, and I wanted my father's night to remain peaceful. I had made dinner reservations at a steakhouse he loved. But of course my mother vetoed it. I already made his favorite pot roast. No need to waste money at overpriced restaurants. And just like that, another plan dissolved into her control. We sat at the polished dining room table, the good china gleaming under the chandelier. The meal was fine, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. My father drank glass after glass of wine, his laughter forced, his hands trembling slightly as he refilled. Each topic of conversation, neighbors, the garden, even weather, was steered back by my mother into complaint or criticism. Finally, the moment for gifts arrived. I slid the box across to him, heart racing. He opened it slowly, and when the watch glimmered in his hands, his face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Heidi, I can't accept this. It's too much," he stammered, even as his fingers caressed the band with wonder. "Of course you can," I urged. "You deserve it, Dad. Happy birthday." But before the warmth of that moment could settle, my mother's face hardened. "How much did that cost?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Gloria," my father warned gently. "Must be nice," she continued, ignoring him. "To have so much disposable income while we're counting pennies for groceries." The air cracked. My father tried to smooth it over, but the damage was done. The celebration had turned into a battleground. I went to bed early in my lavender childhood room, texting Sophia under the covers. "Remind me why I do this to myself." Her reply was instant. "Because you love your dad. Call if you need me." The next morning, the real explosion came. I had overheard them arguing in the study, their voices carrying down the hall. My father admitted the credit cards were maxed out, property taxes due. He begged her to let me help. She hissed back that she wouldn't take charity from her own daughter. I walked into the kitchen later, coffee brewing, heart pounding, and finally said the words I had swallowed for years. "Mom, Dad, I overheard you. I know things are serious. Let me help. It's literally my job to make financial plans. My mother's face went white, then red. So now you think we're incompetent? That we can't manage our own affairs? That's not what I'm saying, I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. I want to help you build something sustainable. Of course you do, she snapped. Little Miss Perfect with all the answers. You have no idea what the real world is like. Everything's been handed to you. That lie pierced me. Nothing had been handed to me. I had worked through college, paid off my loans, clawed my way into my career. My success was mine. And in that moment, something inside me cracked open. I've worked for everything I have, I said firmly. I am not judging you. I am trying to help. Her eyes blazed. We don't need your help. And we certainly don't need your judgment. My father sat silent, staring into his coffee, the Rolex gleaming ironically on his wrist. That was the moment I knew. The script would never change. My mother would always attack. My father would always enable. And I would always be the scapegoat unless I chose something different. I drew a shaky breath. There won't be another time. I'm done playing this role. Done pretending. Her chair screeched back as she stood. How dare you speak to us like that, in our own home, after everything we've done for you? What have you done for me, Mom? I demanded, my voice shaking but strong. Made me feel inadequate? Criticized my choices? Taken my financial support without a single word of thanks? Her face contorted. Financial support? What are you talking about? I almost told her about the mortgage payments right then. Almost. But I stopped myself. I wasn't going to hand her another weapon. Instead, I whispered, "Forget it." "No, tell me," she demanded. The argument spiraled, her words venomous, my father's silence unbearable. For the first time in my life, I saw the pattern clearly. And I realized I had the power to break it. But breaking it would come at a cost I wasn't sure I was ready to pay. And that's where everything shifted. Because once you finally stand up to the people who've broken you, you can never go back to being silent again. The kitchen was suffocating that morning, thick with the smell of coffee and the sharper scent of rage. My father's silence pressed against my shoulders like a weight, while my mother circled me with words sharpened into blades. Every sentence from her mouth was an indictment of my existence. I had disappointed her. I had embarrassed her. I had been selfish, ungrateful, cruel. And then it slipped out, the truth I had held back for 3 long years. "I've been paying your mortgage," I said, my voice low but steady. $2,200 every month. $79,200 in total. Without me, this house would have been gone years ago. The room froze. My father's face drained of color, his coffee cup trembling in his hand. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, soundless for once. For the briefest second, I thought silence might mean recognition. Gratitude even. But then her eyes hardened into ice. "Get out," she whispered. "Mom," my father started, panic rising in his voice. "Get out of my house," she snapped, louder this time. "And don't ever come back. If you think we're such burdens, such failures, then leave us. Go live your perfect little life and forget about us." I turned to my father, desperate for him to finally stand up for me, for us. But he only looked away, the Rolex on his wrist gleaming like an accusation. His silence was worse than her rage. For the first time, I believed her. I nodded, the finality settling into my bones. "Fine. I'll take you at your word." I climbed the stairs in a daze, my hands mechanical as they packed my overnight bag. Each movement felt like a closing door, folding a shirt, zipping the bag, slinging it over my shoulder. I descended slowly, the weight of 32 years pressing down with every step. My mother stood by the window, arms crossed, her back rigid. My father hovered helplessly in the hallway. "She doesn't mean it," he whispered. "Give her time to calm down." "She means it," I answered. "And for once, I'm listening." I opened the front door, closing it gently behind me. Not a slam, not a dramatic exit, just quiet, final. As I walked to my car, the house loomed behind me. The manicured lawn, the perfect shutters, the facade of stability. A house I had kept alive with my own sacrifice, now spitting me out like I had never belonged. The 40-minute drive back to the city passed in a blur. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My eyes stayed dry. There were no screams, no sobs. Just a numbness so complete it felt like I was floating outside my own body. When I finally pulled into my apartment parking lot, I sat there for nearly an hour, unable to move. My phone buzzed. Sophia, checking in. "How's the birthday weekend going? Surviving?" I called her, my voice calm as I recounted the morning. Calm until I repeated my mother's final words. "Get out and never come back." Then the dam broke. The tears came fast and hot, choking me, and all I could say was, "She meant it, Sophia. This time she meant it." "I'm coming over," she said firmly. "Don't move." 20 minutes later, she slid into the passenger seat of my car with a bottle of wine and a bag of sandwiches. She pulled me into her arms. First hug, then food, then wine, then we figure it out. That night, I slept on her sofa, my body exhausted, but my mind still replaying the scene in that kitchen. The words, the silence, the finality of it all. For years I had believed leaving would mean I was betraying my family, but as I lay under her spare blanket, one thought pulsed steady in my mind. Maybe walking away wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was survival. Before I move on, I need to leave you with this thought. What would it take for you to finally say enough? To step out of the house, the job, the relationship that has been breaking you piece by piece. Sometimes, the strongest choice is not staying, it's leaving. And though it feels like death in the moment, it might be the only way you truly begin to live. The first week after I walked out felt like stepping into a void. My phone buzzed with calls from my father, his voice filling my voicemail with pleas. "Please call me back, Amelia. We need to talk." But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, only the familiar expectation that I would smooth things over. My mother didn't call at all. Her silence was louder than his words. I spent nights on Sophia's couch, terrified to be alone with my thoughts. By Tuesday, I forced myself back to work, sliding on the mask of professionalism like armor. To my clients, I was still the steady financial advisor they trusted with their portfolios. Inside, I was unraveling. Each time my phone lit up with my father's number, my chest tightened. My body still expected me to fold, to crawl back, to fix it. But something inside me had changed. After 10 days of emotional limbo, I sat down with a colleague, Diane, another advisor I trusted. For the first time, I laid out the truth. 3 years of secretly paying $2,200 every month toward a mortgage that wasn't mine. $79,200 in total. Money I could have used for my own down payment, my retirement, even something as simple as a vacation. She looked at me like I had confessed a crime. "Legally, you have no obligation to continue. The mortgage is in their names, not yours. You've been making gifts, costly ones. If you stop, the responsibility returns to them." Her words landed with both terror and liberation. I had been carrying a burden that was never mine to begin with. That night, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic payments. Watching that confirmation message flash across my screen felt like cutting a cord that had tied me down for years. My stomach twisted with guilt, but beneath it, something new stirred. Relief. With the mortgage off my back, doors opened that I had long believed were closed. Within weeks, I put a deposit on a sunlit 2-bedroom condo in a converted Victorian house. Hardwood floors, bay windows, a little balcony where I could finally plant herbs of my own. Most importantly, it was mine. No one could order me out. No one could make me feel like an intruder in my own space. Still, guilt clung like a shadow. Nights in my new condo, I would lie awake, imagining foreclosure notices, piling on my parents' porch, picturing my father's tired face, my mother's fury. The instinct to rescue them had been ingrained in me since childhood, and breaking it felt like tearing skin from bone. That's when I started seeing Dr. Martinez, a therapist who specialized in family trauma. During our first session, after I spilled my story in one exhausted rush, she looked me in the eye and said, Amelia, what you've lived through is emotional abuse. Your mother displays classic narcissistic traits, and your father enables her by refusing to intervene. I protested, weakly. But she can be kind sometimes. When I do exactly what she wants. That's part of the cycle, she explained. Moments of warmth keep you hooked, hoping for change. But has the fundamental dynamic ever shifted? I had no answer, because the truth was no. The cycle had never broken. Therapy gave me words I hadn't had before. Enmeshment, enabling, boundaries. It was like she had handed me a map for a territory I'd been stumbling through blind my entire life. Yet, even with that clarity, the guilt lingered. My parents were adults, perfectly capable of working, of downsizing, of facing reality. But part of me still felt like the bad daughter, the ungrateful child. And that brings me to a question I want to ask you. If you had to choose between your own peace and your family's approval, which would you pick? Tell me in the comments. I want to know how others have faced that impossible choice. In the weeks that followed, I painted my new condo with colors. My mother would have hated a bold teal in the living room, a cheerful yellow in the kitchen. I adopted a cat, Leo, who greeted me at the door each night and curled against me as I slept. For the first time in years, my home was quiet, not with tension, but with peace. But even in that peace, I knew the story with my parents wasn't finished. Because families, even broken ones, don't just disappear. And sooner or later, the past comes knocking. Dr. Martinez became my lifeline in those early weeks. Each session felt like peeling back layers of my life that I had buried under excuses and guilt. She listened patiently as I recounted years of criticism, the impossible standards, the silences that felt like betrayals. Then she spoke words that reframed everything I thought I knew. What you describe is a pattern of emotional abuse, she said gently. Your mother uses criticism and control to maintain power. Your father avoids conflict by enabling her behavior, even at the cost of your well-being. The words struck like lightning. Abuse. Enabling. I had never labeled it that way before. I had always told myself I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too ungrateful. But sitting there, I realized those lies had been planted in me so deeply that I watered them myself. I told her about the mortgage payments. About the $79,200 I had poured into saving their house. I asked if that made me complicit. You weren't wrong to help, she explained. Your intentions were rooted in love, but secrecy protected them from reality. It allowed your father to hide, your mother to deny. Sometimes helping can hurt if it prevents growth. Her words stung, but they freed me. I had not failed them by stopping. I had only stopped failing myself. Each week, Dr. Martinez guided me to untangle the knots I had mistaken for love. She showed me how boundaries were not betrayal, but survival. She reminded me that my parents were adults responsible for their own choices. My father chose not to find adequate work after losing his job. My mother chose not to contribute or downsize. Those were their decisions, not burdens I was meant to shoulder. Still, letting go felt unnatural. At night, guilt pressed against my chest like a stone. My mind conjured images of foreclosure, of my parents humiliated before the community. My instinct screamed to fix it, to step back into the fire. But Dr. Martinez helped me sit with the discomfort without reacting. That guilt, she said, isn't truth, it's conditioning. You were trained to believe your worth depended on sacrificing for them. But your worth exists without their approval. Her words lingered long after our sessions ended. For the first time, I saw the cycle clearly. My mother's cruelty wasn't random, it was a strategy, whether conscious or not. Her criticisms kept me insecure. Her rare kindnesses kept me hooked. My father's silence kept the machine running. And I had been the fuel. I started journaling after each session, recording patterns I had never dared admit. How my mother often picked fights before milestones, graduations, promotions, even birthdays, as if sabotaging joy gave her control. How she pitted my siblings and me against each other to keep us divided. How my father's peacekeeping was really surrender dressed as love. And slowly, I began to reclaim pieces of myself. I painted my condo walls in colors that made me happy, not colors that would impress guests. I cooked meals without worrying whether someone would criticize them. I learned to sit in silence without waiting for the next explosion. It wasn't easy, healing Never Island, but for the first time, my life wasn't consumed by their storms. And yet, I knew the storm wasn't gone, it was only distant. My parents were still out there, still tangled in denial and pride. Eventually, their crisis would find me again. What I didn't realize then was how soon that call would come, and how much it would test the fragile boundaries I was only just learning to hold. Because love doesn't disappear just because you understand the damage it caused. And when love collides with truth, the choice between helping and enabling can break you all over again. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks and 2 days after I walked out of that house. I was in my office between client meetings when my phone lit up with my father's number. My chest tightened the way it always did, but this time, instead of silencing the call, I pressed accept. "Hello, Dad," I said cautiously. "Amelia." His voice carried a rush of relief. "How are you, sweetheart?" The casual tone, as if nothing had happened, stung more than any accusation. "I'm okay. How are you?" "Oh, you know, getting by." He cleared his throat. "We've missed you at Sunday dinners." I stayed quiet. If he wanted to pretend things were normal, he would have to do it without my help. "Your mother has been asking about you," he added. The lie was so thin I almost laughed. If she had asked, it was only to sharpen her anger. Finally, his voice dropped. "There's something else. The bank sent us notices. Late payments on the mortgage. I don't understand it. The payments have always gone through automatically. Ever since." His words trailed off, and I heard the moment the truth began to dawn. "Amelia, what did you mean that day, when you said you'd been paying our mortgage?" I closed my eyes. The truth I had kept locked inside for 3 years pressed against my throat until it spilled out. I meant exactly what I said. I've been making those payments $2,200 every month for the past 3 years. $79,200 in total. That's why the bank never came after you. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. "That's not possible," he whispered. "We would have known." "How?" I asked gently. "The statement only shows that the payment was received. You never looked at the details. You assumed it was coming from your accounts." His breath hitched. "Why would you do that? How could you even afford?" "Because I love you," I said firmly. "Because I make good money, and I lived modestly so I could help you keep your home. Because I couldn't stand to see you lose everything." Another silence, this one jagged with shame. 3 years, he repeated. 79,000. Amelia, I had no idea. I told your mother I had freelance consulting work. I didn't want her to know I was stocking shelves at a hardware store. His voice cracked. I wanted to keep my dignity. "There's no shame in honest work," I told him softly. "The shame is in not facing reality." "Does this mean, have you stopped?" "Yes." My answer was steady. When Mom told me to get out and never come back, I took her at her word. That included the payments. "But the house," he began, "is not my responsibility," I finished. "It never was. You and Mom need to make decisions now. Sell the house, get jobs that actually cover your expenses, create a plan for retirement. All things I offered to help with before she threw me out." He sounded small, almost childlike. "She'll never agree to sell. Then she can work, or you can find better paying work, or both." "But Dad, I can't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore." There was a pause, then a quiet confession. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," I replied. "Just understand that things have to change. I'm not coming back to the old dynamic. I won't be the scapegoat anymore." "I'll talk to your mother," he promised quickly. "I'll make her understand." I almost laughed. The idea of him making her understand felt like a dream. Still, I softened. "We can meet, Dad, but not at the house. I'll see you Thursday at noon at Riverside Cafe. Just you. Not Mom. I'm not ready to see her yet." He agreed, thanking me over and over before we hung up. When the call ended, I sat at my desk shaking, but lighter than I had in years. For the first time, the truth was out, and the world hadn't ended. What I didn't know was that Thursday would bring its own storm, because my father hadn't told me everything, and my mother wasn't about to let me go without one last fight. I arrived at Riverside Cafe 20 minutes early, nerves humming under my skin like electricity. I chose a corner table facing the door, the same way I'd prepare for an important client meeting. My notes were in my bag, boundaries I'd written out, words I'd practiced with Dr. Martinez until my voice stopped shaking. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a line in the sand. At exactly noon, my father walked in. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn. The Rolex I'd given him on his birthday was missing from his wrist, and I wondered if he'd pawned it already. He spotted me, relief washing across his face as if he hadn't been sure I'd come. "Amelia," he said softly. "Thank you for meeting me." We ordered coffee, but the silence between us was heavier than steam rising from the mugs. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I've been doing some thinking. I want to say I'm sorry for that day, for years of not protecting you from your mother, for letting you carry more than you should have." His honesty startled me. I had prepared for excuses, for guilt trips. Instead, there was shame in his eyes. For a moment, my heart ached for him. Then he continued. "I went through the bank records after we spoke. I saw the truth. 3 years, Amelia. You carried us while I pretended everything was fine. I can't tell you how ashamed I feel." I nodded slowly. "I didn't tell you to make you ashamed. I did it because I loved you." "I know," he whispered. "That's what makes it worse." For the first time, I believed he understood. But then, just as I began to breathe easier, he shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else. I asked your mother to come today." The words hit me like ice water. "What?" "She needs to apologize. You need to hear her out." I shook my head, fury rising. "I told you, just you. I'm not ready to see her." But the cafe door swung open, and there she was. My mother, smaller than I remembered, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a plain ponytail, makeup minimal. She walked toward us, hesitating only once before standing at our table. "You ambushed me," I hissed at my father. "I thought it would help," he whispered helplessly. My mother's voice was subdued. "Hello, Amelia. May I sit?" Against every instinct, I nodded. The cafe was full, and I refused to cause a scene. She perched on the edge of the chair, her hands twisting in her lap. "I saw the bank statements," she began, her voice thin. "I didn't know. I truly didn't know you were the one paying." I stared at her, unflinching. "And would it have mattered if you did? Would you have treated me any differently?" Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. "I would like to think so. But I was cruel. I told myself it was for your own good, that I was pushing you to be better. But the truth is—" She faltered, then met my eyes. "I was jealous." The confession hung in the air like smoke. "Jealous?" I repeated. "I gave up my career to raise you children. That's what women of my generation were expected to do. I don't regret having you. But I regret losing myself. And when you became successful, independent, everything I had given up, it was easier to criticize you than to face my own regret." Her honesty stunned me. Part of me wanted to lean forward, to believe this was a breakthrough. But another part, the wiser part, knew one confession didn't erase decades of damage. "I appreciate your honesty," I said carefully. "But our relationship can't go back to what it was. I won't be your punching bag. I won't bankroll your lifestyle. And I won't accept cruelty disguised as concern." She nodded, tears glistening. "I understand." Do I believe her? That's another question. Because words are easy. Change is not. Before I continue, I want to leave you with this. If the person who hurt you finally admitted their jealousy, their regrets, would you forgive them? Or would you hold the line? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the answer isn't as simple as we think. What happened next in that cafe changed the trajectory of our family forever. The weeks after that cafe meeting felt unreal, like I had stepped into a version of my family I didn't recognize. For the first time, conversations were not about denial, but about decisions. Difficult, necessary, overdue decisions. My parents put the Colonial on the market. The house that had been my mother's crown jewel, the fortress she guarded against whispers, was now a listing on a realtor's website. A stranger's camera captured our granite countertops, our manicured lawn, even the lavender walls of my childhood bedroom, frozen in photographs for potential buyers. Seeing those pictures online was surreal. A piece of me grieved, but another piece felt free. That house had been a stage for too much pain. Letting it go was not just practical, it was symbolic. My father found a new job as a sales manager for a smaller company. The salary was 60% of what he had once made, but he seemed lighter, less consumed by pressure. When I asked him how he felt, he smiled faintly. They appreciate me here. It's not about climbing ladders anymore, it's about doing work I can take pride in. But the bigger surprise came from my mother. She took a receptionist job at a real estate office. At 63, she walked into her first workplace in over 4 decades. At first she downplayed it, just answering phones, Amelia, nothing important. But within weeks, she organized the office so efficiently that her boss offered to pay for her to earn her real estate license. The woman who once scoffed at my career was suddenly chasing one of her own. We spoke once a week by phone. Our conversations were careful, tentative. She still struggled with apologies, but there were cracks in her armor. One evening she said, almost shyly, "The younger agents ask me for advice. They say clients trust me because I have life experience." There was pride in her voice, earned pride, not borrowed from someone else's accomplishments. For the first time, I heard joy that didn't come at my expense. The townhouse they bought was a third the size of the Colonial. 2 bedrooms, modest kitchen, small patch of grass out front. My father told me one afternoon, "I don't miss the big house as much as I thought I would. All those rooms we never used, all that stuff we didn't need, this feels simpler, better." It struck me then. Sometimes the walls we fight hardest to keep are the very ones that cage us. Our relationship was far from healed. I still ended phone calls when her tone turned sharp. I still enforced my boundaries like guardrails, reminding her that criticism disguised as concern was unacceptable. She bristled, but she respected it more than I expected. Slowly, we were learning a new language, one built not on guilt or manipulation, but on choice. I visited once a month, never more. Each visit felt fragile, like walking across a glass bridge that could crack beneath us. But there were moments, small, fleeting, where I saw something that might grow. My mother showing me the stack of flashcards she used to study real estate terms. My father proudly giving me tomatoes from his tiny new garden. Ordinary moments but free of poison. I won't pretend I trusted it completely. Part of me waited for the storm to return. But another part allowed hope to flicker. Hope that by losing the house, by facing reality, they might finally discover a version of themselves not built on denial. And maybe, just maybe, that meant we could discover a version of family that wasn't built on suffering. 6 months can change almost nothing, or it can change everything. For me, those 6 months were the difference between suffocating in the shadow of my parents' house and breathing freely in the walls of my own home. My condo became my sanctuary. I painted a teal accent wall in the living room, a color my mother would have hated. I planted herbs on the balcony, their fragrance greeting me each morning. I adopted Leo, a dignified orange tabby who claimed my bed as his throne. Every corner of that space reminded me that I belonged there, that no one could order me out. Therapy with Dr. Martinez became less about survival and more about growth. The panic attacks stopped. The nightmares faded. She told me one afternoon, "You've done in 6 months what some people can't manage in decades. You've broken a cycle." I laughed softly, but inside I knew she was right. I had stopped trying to win love that hurt me, and I had started building love that nourished me. Meanwhile, my parents were adjusting to their new reality. My father thrived in his smaller company, enjoying the respect he received without the crushing pressure of his old career. "I feel like myself again," he admitted over lunch one day, pride softening his face. But the true transformation came from my mother. She didn't just keep her receptionist job, she excelled. Within 3 months she had passed her real estate exam, earning her license. She called me one Sunday evening with a spark in her voice I had never heard before. "The younger agents ask me for advice," she said. "They trust me, they listen." For a moment I didn't recognize her. The woman who had spent years tearing me down was finally building herself up. And then came the unexpected. She started seeing a therapist of her own. It wasn't because I begged. It wasn't a condition I set. She chose it. "One day," she told me quietly, "a client walked in, who looked like you. She had a little girl with her. And I saw us the way we used to be. Before I became so bitter, I realized how much I destroyed." Her therapist diagnosed her with narcissistic tendencies rooted in her own childhood trauma. For the first time, she faced the mirror she had always forced me to hold. Sometimes she would call me after sessions, voice raw, apologizing for moments I barely remembered but she now recognized as cruel. I didn't rush to forgive, but I also didn't hang up. I let her words stand, fragile but real. Our relationship wasn't magically healed. It was cautious, full of boundaries I enforced without apology. I visited once a month. I answered her calls only when I had energy. I ended conversations the moment they turned toxic. And for the first time, she respected those limits. It wasn't perfect, it was human, and that was enough. The biggest lesson I learned in those 6 months was this: love without boundaries is not love, it's sacrifice. And sacrifice without recognition becomes self-erasure. By stepping back, I hadn't destroyed my family. I had forced them to grow. My father rediscovered dignity. My mother found independence. And I discovered myself. Sometimes the most radical act of love is not carrying someone else's weight, but letting them carry their own. When I look back now, it's hard to believe how much has shifted. 6 months ago, I was still bleeding from my mother's words, still carrying my father's silence, still paying for a house that symbolized my captivity. Today, I sit on my balcony with Leo curled at my feet, basil and rosemary swaying in the evening breeze, and I finally understand what freedom feels like. It isn't loud. It isn't triumphant. It's quiet. It's peace. I used to think love meant sacrifice without end, that being a good daughter meant emptying myself to keep others comfortable, that pleasing my parents even at the cost of my sanity was loyalty. But love without boundaries is not love, it's servitude. And loyalty without truth is just fear dressed up as virtue. The hardest lesson I learned is this: you cannot heal people who refuse to face their own reflection. For years I tried to water concrete, believing my love could make it bloom. All it did was drain me. Only when I stopped, when I let go, did change begin. My father rebuilt dignity in honest work. My mother discovered pride in her own accomplishments. And I discovered myself, whole and worthy, even without their approval. There are still scars. There are moments when my mother's voice sharpens and my chest tightens, when my father's silences ache. But I no longer carry their weight. I carry mine, and it is enough. I want to tell you something that I wish someone had told me years ago. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not ungrateful for refusing to fund denial. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the story you were born into and write your own ending. And if you are listening to this, maybe it's because some part of you needs permission to choose yourself. Consider this, that permission. My story didn't end with a perfect reconciliation. It ended with something better: truth. My parents and I may never have the fairy tale closeness others expect. But we have honesty now, we have respect. And I have peace. That's more than I ever dreamed possible. So, if you take anything from my journey, let it be this: love is not proven by how much you endure. Love is measured by how much you grow together or apart. And maybe that's the ultimate revenge against pain, refusing to let it define you, and choosing instead to live fully, freely, and unapologetically. Before you go, I want to leave you with this. If my story made you think about your own family, your own boundaries, then stay with me. The next video dives into another story of breaking free from generational cycles, a story of a woman who faced betrayal at her sister's wedding and found the courage to turn humiliation into empowerment. Click through, and let's continue this journey together. Because you don't have to stay trapped. Not in a house, not in a story, not in someone else's definition of love. You can choose your freedom, and sometimes, that choice will save your life. When I finally closed the last chapter of this story, I realized something unexpected. Healing doesn't look like fireworks. It doesn't feel like some grand finale where every wound is suddenly gone. Healing is quieter, more fragile, and infinitely more precious. It is waking up in a home that feels safe because it belongs to you. It is cooking dinner without bracing yourself for criticism. It is learning to sit in silence without waiting for the next explosion. Healing is building a life where peace isn't the exception, but the rule. For a long time, I thought I had lost everything the day my mother told me to get out and never come back. But the truth is, that was the day I finally found myself. I had been buried under years of obligation, guilt, and invisible contracts that told me I was responsible for everyone else's happiness. Walking away tore those contracts apart. And what grew in their place was something stronger. Self-respect. My parents are still part of my life, but on different terms. They live smaller, simpler lives now, and I live freer because of it. I love them, but I love myself too. That balance is something I never thought possible. If you've carried the weight of someone else's expectations, let this be a reminder. You are allowed to put it down. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to begin again, even if beginning means walking away. Because sometimes, the bravest act of love is not saving others, it's saving yourself. And when you do, you discover that the life waiting on the other side isn't just survivable. It's beautiful.